As for right now, it's Assemblywoman Claudia Tenney on the phone with us, and hopefully her run for Congress going strong as well. Claudia, how are you? Good morning.
Great. Good morning, Dave. How are you?
Doing...
Jay. I assume Jay and Sam are still there?
Yes. Yep, absolutely. And great to have you on the phone this morning. First of all, your impressions of the Iowa caucuses last night.
Wow. I think the talk of the night is how close Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton are.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Or ended up. I don't know I don't know that it was very, very small margin, right?
A tenth of a percentage point.
Not even a point.
Right? Yeah.
It was that. Oh, it got even closer when I went to bed then.
Yes, and then Marco Rubio, I think a victory sort of in finishing a strong third on the Republican side, too.
Just
Very
point behind.
impressive. No, the Rubio performance was very impressive, which is going to be interesting because when Iowa is a unique entity unto itself, so you move on to the others, it looks like it may be very, very competitive, and Marco Rubio may now win a few states.
Yeah.
It's some pundits are saying that now it becomes a traditional Republican race, especially if Trump loses again in New Hampshire and then maybe South Carolina. It becomes a traditional Republican race, and maybe Trump begins to fade away. What do you think?
We'll see. He was quite gracious last night.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't catch all of it because I was out. But I think that from what I saw, and we're only limited by what we see in the news, the TV news. So I saw that he was quite gracious. I think that most of them, I think Marco Rubio gave a very humble, nice speech, and I know Ted Cruz gave more of a inspiring kind of constitutional speech.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting. I didn't hear all of I didn't hear Hillary at all. Did she speak?
I didn't hear her either. That's funny you say that.
She spoke a little too soon.
Little past her bedtime, maybe. Who knows?
Yes, I think she came out and
Grandma had to go to bed.
She came out and I think she had made an announcement that she won before the actual numbers came out. So I think there was some concern.
Dear.
Yeah.
I think it was guarded, though. I saw something on Twitter.
Numbers to reach us, by the way, if you want to get in touch, you can text us, especially during Claudia's interview. If you have any questions or comments, 623-0373 here on the Talk of the Town.
Claudia, before we get into some of the meat and potatoes, another thing that's been swirling around, we know the Senate has done well with their passage of MMA going to the Assembly now. What do you see MMA for the Assembly this time around?
Well, we're hoping that the Speaker will let it out because it has well past the number of sponsors needed to pass it. So there's 150 members of the state assembly. So theoretically, 76 would mean that it could pass by a simple majority. And I believe there are more than 76 sponsors. So that would tell you that it should come to the floor for a vote and pass. But it's been held up because of the speaker-dominated system that we have in Albany. And so the speaker has a unilateral power to prevent popular bills from coming to the floor. Which is why one of the initiatives we supported, the Spirit of 76 bill, which means if it's 76, it goes to the floor for a vote, meaning 76 sponsors. So I think this year we're here that MMA is going to go. Joe Morelli is the majority leader who has his roots in Utica, is actually the sponsor of the bill, the main sponsor. And we're hoping that he's going to have the influence this year to get that bill to the floor, and hopefully the governor will sign it. I think it looks better this year than it has in years past with Sheldon Silver out of there.
Good deal. Assemblywoman Claudia Tenney, the congressional hopeful, joining us on the Talk of the Town at 100.7 FM WUTQ. Some news about some filings with regard to your campaign that may have emerged from a different radio show. Is that right, Claudia?
Yeah. Well, some people don't understand how the filing system works, and so they go and they talk on the radio anyway, even though they haven't done their homework. But yes, there was your competitor radio show indicated that I hadn't filed my filings or something, but they don't understand that the way that the FEC works, the Federal Election Commission, is that you reach a filing deadline. For example, the last deadline was December 31st, and so you have to report anything you receive from the prior date up until December 31st, but nothing after that date. And that particular filing is due to be filed on January 31st of the next year. And so I filed on, January 31st, and there were, of course, no donations are counted from January 1st to January 31st because they'll be in the next filing cycle. And this other radio show said that I didn't file my January statement. so I didn't put any of my January filings in, and they were just inaccurate in what they were trying to say.
No, we can mention the competitor here. We don't mind. It's WIBX. You were on the Keeler.
I don't know.
No, that's okay. That's fine. You were on the Keeler show, and we heard about that.
It was Bill Keeler. He was attacking me.
Well, and then also, I think there was some talk of maybe the fact that they have a lack of respect for our program, and that's unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that on their end there, but that a little of that seemed to emerge from the audio that we heard of your conversation on that show.
Well, they giggled and laughed when I mentioned that you had conducted a poll in the congressional race, and to your credit, you said this is unscientific. It's just a poll of our viewers and our listeners. That's it. And viewers on Facebook and listeners on your radio program. And I don't know what the total numbers you had were, but I noticed that seemed to be quite a number of votes, and you had a good listening audience. Mm-hmm. And there was no poll. The whole issue with Keeler was I haven't done a poll, and there were a number of polls conducted, and I just said, why aren't these people who are all jumping into the congressional race did a series of polls, and now they're all getting out citing their family? Well, why'd you do a poll if it was up to your family in the first place? So I just thought it was a little odd. And so, Bill decided to, Keeler decided to attack me for some reason for citing the WTQ poll. Mm-hmm. But quite honestly, that's just the only poll that I've seen that's been disclosed. I mean, there's others, but
you haven't done any polling yourself at this point.
No, I haven't done it. No, I mean, I will at some point, but right now I don't even know who's in the race. So,
that's true. How many more do you think will get in the race when all is said and done?
I don't know. I just find it so interesting that, the field has been cleared twice now. Mm-hmm. I announced in November. Richard Hanna announced his retirement in December. A number of people got in, local officials and others, and then they've all stepped out. And then now there's new people thinking about coming in. So, I think that it's interesting, and I encourage more of them to come in. The water's warm. Get in the pool. Be part of the process. It's a good thing. The more people that get into this, the better.
They always ask a team, like if there's another team they'd rather face in a matchup down the road in the NFL. Do you care about that kind of thing in terms of your future opponents in the congressional race?
I haven't seen. Yeah, of course. You would. Certainly everybody would like an easier race. But, again, I always say this to people. The Congress is the most important position in our nation, even more important than president. And I know we spend billions of dollars are being spent on the presidential race. But if you look at the Constitution, which I've taken an oath to uphold, as all sworn officers have, whether you're a police officer or a fireman or you're, working in any kind of job in government, Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, the first section, the most important, creates the Congress. And Section 2 says the Congress shall be elected every second year. And it's very important. It doesn't say, like many people have told me when I go before a number of people, it doesn't say the Congress shall be elected every second year until the incumbent decides it's time to retire. I mean, that's the antithesis of what we stand for as a nation. So I encourage all people to get in and to be part of the process. It's a great thing. I ran for Congress in 2014 and I lost, but I have to tell you, it was one of the most exciting, interesting experiences, and it was an honor to run for the position. So I encourage people to do this. This is what our country is founded on, is to have people come out and stand for something and run for office.
And in that race, you fared fairly well, really close, and the discrepancy with money in campaign funds was huge. How do you, and we just talked about your filings as we got into the interview.
Right.
How are you looking as far as finances go now, and then what do you plan on doing as far as going forward?
Well, actually, so we're going to raise as much money as we can. The filings, I felt that I did pretty well with my first filing, which was as of December 31st. Remember, Richard did not get out until the 20th of December, right by Christmas time. Mm-hmm. So it's a tough time to raise money during the Christmas season and heading into December 31st. And I didn't have a professional fundraiser like, for example, George Phillips has, that does all this bundling and Washington establishment money that gets all bundled and doubled. And what happens is a lot of those donations are just there as pledges. They're not really donate. You can't use the money. So my money came from individuals and mostly from people here in the district.
Talking to Assemblywoman Claudia Tenney in the congressional hopeful, of course, here on the Talk of the Town at 100.7 FM WUTQ.
Any other interesting topics you want to get in regards to the race? I find it kind of fascinating, some of the poll numbers we were getting into, or the Siena numbers that we just got into.
The corruption in Albany.
The corruption in Albany. And with Steve Greenberg from, and I know you brought this up, trying to talk about term limits, and 60% of, more than that, 89% of New York voters say corruption in state government is a serious problem. 53% say very serious. And then I thought this was something to really look at. 2/3 say corruption is a serious problem among legislators in their area. And I know this is something that you've been fighting for as far as term limits go. Do you think it goes hand in hand? And where are we going to see term limits and maybe some changes in term limits coming down the pike this year as session comes up?
It's a very serious issue and something that I have been fighting for since the day I got in. And corruption, it isn't just people being carted off and going to jail. That's like crime. But corruption looks a little different in Albany. It's this leader-dominated type of machine politics that we have going on. And it's pervasive. It goes all the way through the state government, even into the local government sometimes. But the local governments, of course, are being beleaguered and being destroyed by the governor for some unknown reason, even though they're the core part of our system. And so corruption is when you have this leader-dominated 3 men in a room, and even though it's not illegal, it's not a crime, it denies the people their rights and the ability to have a voice in government. And that's what corruption is. And it basically says, we're going to you just go back and live your life, and we'll take care of everything for us. And that's the hardest thing, because people come in and get so exasperated, including me. I was so exasperated with the process and with what was going on in Albany. That's part of the reason I ran for office in the first place. So that's the part that, even though technically it's not a crime, it should be. And so the only way that you stop this is getting the embedded people who have been in office year after year after year after year to term limits. A lot of people say, well, we have term limits because we run every 2 years. But it's very hard to run against an incumbent who's part of the establishment. And so you have to, at least in the short term, have to have term limits to just clear the house, to get rid of people who are part of this, entrenched, I say corruption in quotes, entrenched, leader-dominated, unfair, undemocratic system that we now have.
And I know that a bill just came up a few days ago, really, in that regards of the 8-year limit to the Assembly and minority leaders of the Senate.
Yeah, and it should be on all legislators, not just leadership. It should be on all legislators. I have a bill that would do that. I'd love to see a Democrat take that bill, because, as you know, it's tough to get a bill passed as a Republican in the Assembly. You can co-sponsor, but they don't let Republicans have bills come to the floor. I mean, that's in itself no voice for the minority, and that's really what a constitutional republic is founded on, is that the minority at least gets a voice. That's why we have senators based on representation across the country in our federal system, and assembly members based on population. That's part of our separation of powers system and the way that our legislature is set up. So anyway, it's frustrating. But, again, one of the things I remember when I was funny because I'm running again, and I always go back and look at my old materials. And I saw in 2010, my first little mail piece that I sent out and what it said I would do. And it just said, I'm looking going, it says, fighting Albany's dysfunction and corruption, fighting, and it went through lowering taxes, standing up for our small business owners, protecting the security of New Yorkers, protecting our seniors, protecting our schools, things like that. And I looked back at my record and I said, oh, look, that's exactly what my record is today, 5 years later. So I felt pretty good about it. I said, wow, I actually have a proven record of what I'm trying to do. And I'm really just trying to do the same thing, go to Washington. And Washington is probably as bad or worse than Albany in the way that it's so leader-dominated and the special interest control. They're the Washington establishment. And so it's going to be a tough road, and a lot of the establishment people are stabbing at me. And for some reason, your competitor radio station loves the establishment and loves to stab at people. like me and others who are courageous enough to stand and do something for their people that they represent.
And Claudia, thanks for coming on this morning and
Thank you. I appreciate it.
clarifying what happened on WIBX, and thanks for sharing with Jay some of those private comments via text message that were shared from our competitor, too. Appreciate your candor with regard to that.
Thank you.
And before
great. You guys, you do a great job, and I listen to you every morning.
Thanks.
So.
And before you leave, it's early in the week, but in case we don't talk later in the week, Broncos or Panthers this weekend?
It's our poll question.
Yeah.
My nephew lives in Colorado. He was so devastated when Seattle beat the Broncos. So
yeah,
honestly, I like them both, but I am a Peyton Manning fan.
Yeah, we're with you on that. Thanks for your time.